Hello fellow woodworkers and welcome to this week's edition of the Garage Workshop. This week we're going to be making a Tambour storage unit for my drills. Roll the intro. So if you've been following the channel for a while, you would have seen in a previous video I made this storage unit out of a recycled kitchen that I was given by a friend. If you haven't seen the video, there's a link to it there. Watch it, it's quite an interesting video actually. So I planned to put this on the wall and use it for storing things, and to be honest with you, I never got round to it. And as the storage unit has been in the garage and it's got colder and more damp, it's actually separated at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is use it as a storage unit for my drills. At the moment my drills are just sitting on top of my mitre station, which isn't really ideal. So I'm going to take it all apart, break it down. I'm going to use the top, the bottom and the side pieces of wood, and I'm going to create a place to store all my drills that can go on the wall. I also am going to attempt to do a sliding tambour door for the front of it and put some storage for clamps underneath. So the first stage is to take this apart. Let's get going. So luckily taking the unit apart was a very quick and easy task. Just a few bolts to unscrew and take off. Even though I put it together quite well in the first time, like I said, it had obviously been in the cold and the wood had swollen. Some of the joints were slightly more pushed apart than I would have expected. So when I'd taken it all apart, I could see then what pieces of wood I had left to play with. Okay, so these are the bits I've recycled. So you've got the two sides of the units there. You've got the top and bottom there, but to be honest with you, they're pretty far gone. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to use them. All the screws and fixings there. The back panel, which is sort of 6mm wide. It feels like a piece of solid MDF. And the shelves that were on the inside. Now, the plan is to build basically a box very similar to the one that was there before, and it's going to attach to the wall over here. So it's got to be as wide as that part of the wall, and it's going to hang down with some clamp storage on the bottom. So the first thing to do is measure up the sides, get those cut. I'm not sure if I'm going to put a back on it. If I do, I might put the back on, a thicker back on for a bit of rigidity. So I'm going to mark up the wood, measure the wood, but the first thing I need to do is get the depth of my drills that are going to be in it. So let's do that now. So at this point, I thought I'd draw a sketch to help you understand what I was trying to do. And then when I saw the sketch, I realised it wasn't going to help you understand what I was trying to do. Okay. Not the greatest diagram in the world, but I think you get the idea. So this is going to be the outside shell, and there's going to be a shelf just above the bottom of the actual unit, and these are clamps and they'll slide in that way. Here we've got a shelf with the two drills offset, so the top one will be roughly there, this will be a bit more in the middle, and then the bottom shelf, a bit like sort of table football really. This will be sunk in just so it hangs above, so that will allow me to move the shelves slightly closer together. And then obviously this one will be more sort of here, and then this one will fit in at the end. I've drawn a big gap on here because I might potentially put a shelf in here where I can keep things like the ends, so the extenders and all the drill bits and things that I regularly use, and I might also pop the spare batteries in there yet. I haven't quite decided on that. The other thing I think I'm going to do on the back to attach this to the wall, because it's going through wood which is attached straight to a brick wall, I think I'm going to go for a French cleat system on the back so I can take it off whenever I want to, or if ever I feel like I need to move it. So I'm going to do it that way. And as I said, when I did the measuring, which I know wasn't very easy, the depth, so the depth from this side here, as it were, if it was sort of drawn 3D, this depth here is going to be 24 centimeters. I already know that my biggest drill is 26 centimeters. So what I'm going to do is make sure there's enough clearance here. So I think the unit is going to need to be Let's allow here, say 30. Let's allow that to overrun by about 10. And then about another 30. So it's got to be about 50 or 60 centimeters deep as a minimum. So let's go measure those boards and see how long they are. Okay, so these are the 4 drills that are going to go into my unit. And the plan is not to lie them that way, but to have them almost facing out. So I just need to make sure that the unit is going to be wide enough for all 4 of them. And I'm planning to stagger them. So I've got 1, 1, 1, 1, a bit like a sort of zigzag shape. So what I need to do is find the width of the thickest or widest of the drills and then measure the depth. Now, just from I'm going to say now that the DeWalt, I think possibly is going to be the widest one. That impact driver has got an end in it. So from start to finish, the DeWalt is 22 centimeters and the impact driver with the end on it actually is 23 centimeters, but that won't be on there when it's obviously in the storage. So I think if I went for, realistically, if I went for 23 centimeters, let's say 24, just to give it a bit of extra space, and with the battery on, the DeWalt is 25 and all the others are well below that. So if I go for 24 across widthwise and I go for 26 down, that gives me a little bit of coverage either way. Okay, so if I go for a unit that is 24 centimeters deep, not including the back, and I go for a unit that is 26 down, that's going to be enough to cover that DeWalt drill, which is the biggest of the 4. Okay, so this is what was essentially the side of the unit, and having measured it, it's 71.5 centimeters long, which is a bit longer than I wanted, but because it's finished on all 4 edges, it makes perfect sense to sort of keep it the way it is. The other thing is, this was the back of the unit with the ridge in it, and I'm really tempted to keep that and actually make it the front, because with the Tambour unit where the wood's going to go over and go down, I think it would be much better to use the groove that's existing in it. Then it only leaves me cutting one groove. It makes much more sense to do it that way. And obviously what I've got to do is calculate the length of the tambour, so it goes from here, bearing in mind there will be a shelf across the bottom here, because I don't need all of that 70 centimeters. So there will be a shelf there. The tambour will start here and go over. So when it's closed, there just needs to be enough of the tambour really to get to here. So it makes perfect sense to use this groove that's already in here, and then down the other side I don't have to groove all the way down for that, because the tambour will sort of sit where this gap is. So let's just say this is 50, the tambour only needs to go over, so it should start about here. So it makes perfect sense to use that. I'm not going to use the same IKEA type system that was in this originally, where you drill in those bits and slide them in, and so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to fix it properly, so I'm going to hollow out the holes. The other thing is, there is a little bit of a tilt to this. It's not 100% flat, but again, that doesn't worry me, and I think when I attach everything to it, that will pull it back into place anyway. So the next stage is to get the tops and bottoms, get everything sorted out, and then I can work on putting in the tambour. So now I've got these bits done, let's have a look at that. So I then did a really basic sort of measure up and dry fit, just to make sure everything I thought would fit fitted exactly as I thought it would, and luckily it did, so I moved on. Okay, so as you can see, I've got it sort of mocked out how I want it to be, and these shelves of course fit perfectly between the groove at the back, which is now the groove at the front, because they were the original shelves, which means I just need to find a back panel to go on it. Now that they're laid out, I can see that I've got enough space that I can put the drills, lay the drills on. So if I take my DeWalt drill, it will sit somewhere like that, bearing in mind at the moment it's got the battery on it, and there's more than enough space with the other shelf underneath to fit the other drill. Harder to see, I know, but these other drills will be here and somewhere
like that. So that's what how they'll sit inside it. Now, the good thing about having it this way is all the shelves already fit. I know all of that. The back piece that's going to attach, which I wasn't going to attach, won't sit inside like it did before in a groove. It will actually attach around the outside, and that will give me a little bit more rigidity for when I do the French cleats. And I've got a piece of plywood that I think I can use for this, which actually matches the plywood that's on the wall. So the back of it will look like the back of the wall. So the next stage is to start thinking now about how I'm going to route out that. So I'm going to move on now to make the strips for the tambour. So let's get on with that now. Okay, so to carry on with the recycled theme, for the strips I'm going to use for the tambour, I'm going to use some of this wood. I recently took apart the inside of a caravan, a static caravan, and I was left with some of the leftovers. That's why the foam's there. But I've got these lovely strips of already planed wood, and they're all different widths, but they're exactly the same thickness. So what I think I would do, because it's quite sort of sturdy-ish wood, I'm going to get the table saw out, and I'm just going to cut it into thinnish strips, probably about 6 or 7 mil, and just see what it looks like, see how hard the wood is, see what it comes out as. If it's okay and I'm happy with it, then I'm going to use these slats of wood as the tambour strips. They do need a little bit of cleaning up, some of them. Some of them have got some wooden staples in them, but it's good quality wood, and it would be good to reuse it. Now, it feels quite a hard wood. It's not like pine. It feels quite solid. So let's run it through the table saw, see how it looks.
I've just realised we're making this video that there is obviously a lot more talking than there is usually, and the reason why I've decided to make this video this way and decided to make it in 2 parts is A, this is actually quite a complicated thing to do, and B, I didn't want to sort of cut bits out. I wanted it to be a really sort of accurate description of what went on, so that's why there's a lot more talking in this video than other ones. So the next stage was just to cut down the pieces of wood, the strips of wood I wanted to use. Thank you for all the comments about the way I use the table saw in the videos. I am incredibly careful. Obviously my health and safety and the health and safety of people that are watching these videos is really important to me. You can't really see it very clearly here, but the blade was literally just above the surface of the wood. You can see the wood sort of peeling back at the top there as I was running the strips through, and obviously I used a push stick all the way through, so I was as health and safety conscious as I can be. You can also see I'm wearing protective goggles, protective glasses. I've also got my ear defenders on, and I'm wearing a ventilating mask as well, just to help, because there were quite a lot of individual pieces of dust that flew up from this. You'll also have just seen there I took out a couple of the pins, the staples that were left in the wood, and some of them were so embedded I couldn't actually see them. It's only when I was putting them through the table saw that I saw a spark, to be honest, that I realised there were staples in there. So I took those out as I went, just to keep the wood in the best possible condition.
Okay, so the slats, as you will have seen, were quite easy to cut in lots of ways. I cut them 5 mil, just as a test really, but I think they are going to be a bit too flimsy. I think there's a bit too much play in them, so I think they're going to need to be wider than 5 mil. Because the wood was quite hard, I thought 5 mil would be okay, but to be honest with you, the amount of flex that's in them, I think they need to be a bit thicker. So what I'm going to do is take the next piece and I'm going to go for 8 mil wide and just compare and see how. I've got lots of wood. The other thing, as you'll have just seen, is the wood is quite knotty, and where there are knots it is very susceptible to breaking. So of those strips I cut, I think I cut 8 strips. I can really only probably use 4 or 5 of them, because where the knots are, if it's in the middle of the wood, it's just breaking. So like that one there where the knot is, it's just broken in half. But obviously if the wood was thicker, it wouldn't be like that. So first attempt, not a bad attempt, but let's change the depth on the table saw and run off some new ones.
I think when you're doing a project like this, particularly when you're doing a project that you've never done before or techniques you've never done before, I think trial and error form a really, really important part of what you're doing. And as you will have seen there, I first of all cut all the strips to be 5, which wasn't the correct size at all. So then I went through to 8 to see if that was any better, and you'll see in a minute how that turns out. But I think whenever you build a project like this or design a project like this in your mind, unless you're going to spend hours in SketchUp doing exactly every part of the build, there's nothing wrong with having a bit of trial and error. It's really important.
Okay, so these strips, which are 8mm wide, as you can see, are a lot. I can't bend that in one hand, whereas that one I can. So they're a lot better than the 5mm wide one. So I think that's the right size. Obviously they're too long and they will need to be cut down, but a much better length, I think, certainly than that one. And obviously some of these bits of wood are different sizes, but as long as they are the width of the unit, that's all that matters really, and they're all going to be. So I've got 9 strips there. So what I'm going to do now is take the rest of this wood and just keep cutting all of this wood up till I get to 8mm strips.
The last stage was just to finish cutting off those 8mm strips of wood. I was lucky to have this wood actually. I'd recycled it from a caravan bedding that I had. I'm not quite sure what wood it is. If any of you are watching this and know, please put it in the comments. But it felt a bit almost like pine, but I don't think it was. It was quite soft in the middle, but very hard on the outside. But I soon had all the strips cut.
So, via the magic of YouTube and filmmaking software, you now see all of the strips laid out. They are all various sizes, but the smallest ones, which are these ones at the top, are still big enough that they will fit into the finished unit. So they're all lined up together. There's still quite a bit of cutout in between, just that I need to strip off. Excuse me. So let's have a look like that one there. It's just the where it's been through the table saw. So with all these strips together, and bearing in mind there will probably be a little bit of a gap in between them anyway, I'm just looking to see. I think I'm going to need about 70 centimetres of wood. So let's see if we've got to the magical 70, hopefully. Yeah, so we've got 78 centimetres here. And if I take you back to our unit, so if we're going to get the tambour to stop here, which is the point I think it will do, which is 60 from the top, then I'm going to need about, roughly, bearing in mind that the bend, we won't exactly know where the bend will be. So let's put it in there. I am going to need about 66 centimetres worth, and I think I just said, didn't I, that had over 70. Let's just check again. Yes, I've got 78, so that even allows for a couple of spares. So the next thing I think I want to do is to start now planning on the curve that's going to go up and make the second part of the tambour rail, as it were. So I'm going to start planning this bit out, and then the groove down that side, so that it's got somewhere to stay. So let's do that now.
Wow, I really do talk a lot in this video, don't I? Apologies for that. So the next thing to do was to mark out the groove that I was going to put in the door, and all I did was I mirrored exactly the groove that was already in the door. So as you can see, I'm using my carpenter's square there just to make sure that the line on the inside mirrors the line that I'm putting in pencil. I did check this again off camera just to be doubly sure, and it was exactly the same width as the sort of manufactured groove that was in it. I then used my palm router. I have just bought a new palm router, and that's going to be subject of a tool review, but this Ryobi one is really good for jobs like this, so I wanted to make sure that I did this properly. So I did one pass and then adjusted it to the right depth and did the second pass. I didn't try to take it all out in one go, which I've learnt from previous errors not to do that. Okay, so here is the final groove. You can see nice and straight all the way along, exactly the same width as the machined side. I need to tidy up the end and just do that little bit around the corner, but very happy with how that turned out. It's quite easy to go through this stuff anyway. It is a lot wider than the strip. I'm not sure if that's going to be a problem yet, because obviously by the time this has got the sort of canvas on the back, all the material on the back, it's going to be a bit thicker, and I do want a little bit of play in there anyway. I'm not sure if it is. I can always cut thicker strips. I've got more wood, but I actually quite like the length of this wood, so we'll have to have a go. The next thing to do is to tidy up that bit at the end up there, and also sort this end out, and then move on to the second piece. So let's do that now. So by the time I came on to the second panel and the second section, as you can see, I got a lot better with the router. And again, I did this in two passes at different depths. I didn't want to do it all in one go. So I did the first pass sort of half depth it was, and then adjusted it. It's why you can see me keep moving the router to the other side, which is where the groove is, just to make sure I had the right depth on it. So I ran it through a couple of times. I was quite pleased with the quality. You'll have just seen the quality of how it turned out. There's me just adjusting the depth. The only bit I was a bit worried about was the bit on the top, which I thought could be a bit sketchy, but I did exactly the same thing as I'd done all the way through. I just took it nice and slowly, and as you can see from this sort of detail, I didn't do the whole cutout in one go. I stepped it. So I took it down when I was pleased with that or happy with it. I took it down to the correct level, and then I did the tops in exactly the same way. The only thing I was very careful of here, which I'm not sure if you can pick up on the video, was just making sure that I did two passes back and forward, because it's very easy to miss the odd little bit of wood that hadn't been flattened to the same depth as everything else. So I did more than two passes in some cases, but a minimum of two passes, because I wanted to make sure that I got it exactly spot on. And by the end, I was pleased. A couple of little cutouts, but pleased. Okay, so fellow woodworkers, as you can see, the two channels are now grooved in both edges, ready to take the sliding tambour door. Fairly happy with it, considering I'm not hugely experienced, as you would have seen from the video. I'm not massively experienced with a palm router, so I'm pleased with it. I just put in these two curls on the two corners on the other side of the slot to make sure the tam's got enough space to go all the way over around, and they're pretty equal. So overall, I'm really happy for it. I'm going to leave it here. This is the end of part one. This is a two-part video. I think already we're probably on about 25-30 minutes, but please join me again in part two. And in part two, we'll be actually creating the tambour door and then putting the whole unit together and finishing it off. So if this is your first time at the Garage Workshop, please hit subscribe, like, and the notification bell. If you're a regular viewer, thanks for watching again, and I'll catch you in part two when we'll be finishing the Tambour Cupboard. Take care, woodworkers.